Matthew, thank you so much for joining me today. It's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, good to see you. It's been a while.
I know. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got into this industry.
Yeah, so I was born in Australia on the beaches, so like the ocean and water has always kind of been a big part of my life. And when I was younger, I actually ended up taking an internship in Shanghai, and I knew nothing about the shipping industry. And I remember standing in this office tower, looking over the main river that cuts through the city and seeing the ships that our company was managing floating up the river, transporting all these amazing commodities that are essentially the building blocks of everything we do. They're the chemicals, they're the food, they go into everything that we do. And I just remember how amazing it was to kind of be in that world and think, wow, we're actually physically driving economies with what we do. And I always thought that was really exciting. And I think it kind of stuck with me. And, I ended up spending, another 6 years in the industry, working around the world in Rotterdam, in the US, and also in Singapore, where I eventually met my co-founder, who now runs the company with me, Brett.
Awesome. So Voyager came out of this, real life hands-on experience and frustration with kind of the inefficiency of the industry, right?
Yeah, it was, a problem that we had experienced and lived through with our careers. And the whole thing kind of got started, like a lot of great ideas, actually as a university project. I had taken some time off to go back to school, and I roped in Brett, who I mentioned I used to work with, and we just spent 3 to 6 months looking at the industry and trying to really figure out where it could be done better. And we started to look at areas around communication and how companies work together in the maritime industry. And we did this study and we asked all the different participants in the industry, representing the oil majors, the traders, the shipping companies, all the intermediaries, really simple questions around the sort of tasks they will do in a typical day and how much time they spend on them. And when we collected all of this data back together, and we compared it to how much value these things are actually contributing to the process, the key insight for us was that everyone in the industry we spoke to was spending about 40% of their day on low value, low complexity tasks. And for a company, or for an industry, I should say, where something like $400 billion a year is being spent on freight to move these things around the world, this just seemed like a really inefficient way to do things. And everything just kind of started from that idea and that insight, and the product's just kind of evolved since then.
Yeah. So now, a few years in, what does the technology look like, and what difference does it really make on this industry?
Yeah, so it's really simple. So let's say one of our customers might be a commodity trader. They would go into our platform and they would just click Start Voyage. And what that then does is triggers a sequence of workflows. And what that really does is sends requests for information out to different parties within the value chain, brings that data back into the system, visualize it, tracks it, and records it for our customers. So it's really a more modern approach to communicating, working together, and capturing data for our customers.
Yeah, and I can only imagine the difference it's making for your clients and your customers. So what feedback do you get when you kind of introduce the product and tell them about what it does? What's the reaction? Because I'm sure it's like, oh my gosh, we can do this.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sort of like you've opened the blinds type moment and the light's shining in. We have a large customer that had an entire person just collecting ETA updates from ships, putting them in a spreadsheet and sending them around to all of their customers. It was an extremely qualified person with years of maritime experience who really could be doing something better with their time. We've now got that customer to manage that entire workflow digitally throughout the whole company globally. So it's made a huge difference, not just from a productivity standpoint, but now we have all this data on the performance of those vessels through the different ports, through the different terminals. So we're able to even provide insights on how efficiently their ships are getting through different parts of the world and loading cargo.
So I wonder if maybe you can explain a little bit about how Voyager's technology works.
Yeah, so we think about every voyage as a project. So you think about building a building, you have all of these different stakeholders involved and everyone has little parts to play. And if people don't work together efficiently, the building doesn't get built. We don't see a voyage being any different. If you're a large company that might be out here with an office there, they have to move things like crude oil, chemicals, and gas. And for a typical voyage, they might be involving anywhere from 10 to 20 different companies and stakeholders. And all of these people need to work together really efficiently to make sure that that cargo gets from A to B. The way our technology works is we take all of those steps and processes that these companies need to complete and execute. We create digital versions of them so that when our customers come into our platform and they click Start Voyage, we're able to actually automate a lot of those requests for information. So things like invoices, things like getting updates from the vessel on where it is, how fast it's going. All of those requests and exchanges of information are usually conveyed via email, spreadsheets. Back when I was in the industry, they were still using Yahoo Chat.
Oh, wow.
Now, with our technology, all of that is being streamlined. In many cases, it's being automated. But most importantly for our customers, that data is all sitting in one place. And this is really where we can start deriving a lot of value through the insights that that data can provide on their business.
Yeah. So for you, what's it like running this business in Houston? Houston's such a global city. I'm sure it's a really incredible space to do it, but kind of day to day, what does that look like?
Yeah, so the last 18 months have been, or 12 months have been a little crazy. Yeah. So we have our offices in downtown. We've barely been in them, which is a bit of a shame. But if you look at what we do, which is we sell a product to companies that have very complex, non-containerized supply chains. So this is things like wind turbines, crude oil, gas, grain, metals. If you look at the density of those customers in Houston, being the energy capital of the United States, there are probably few places in the world where you can walk 15 minutes in either direction from where we are now and probably talk to about 100 companies that would potentially be customers. That is a huge benefit. I mean, it improves the customer development of the product when you're early, just being able to be in people's offices easily. So I think that's probably been a huge influence on our ability to grow, make sure we're building the right product, and we're really fortunate that a lot of our customers are just around the corner from us, which has been great.
Absolutely. I wonder if you could kind of talk a little bit about how the pandemic has affected your business. I know you mentioned it not being able to be in your office, and that does suck, but kind of on a larger scale, the world has been kind of globalized in a massively fast way, I think, with the rise of technology through this pandemic. So I don't know if you have any insight on how it's affected your business.
Yeah, well, 2020 was an insane year for us, good and bad. We were built from the beginning as a remote company. So it wasn't deliberate, it just happened that way. Mm-hmm. We have development teams in Brazil, we have team members sitting in Florida. So we were already kind of very used to this way of working. So that wasn't a particularly big transition for us. If anything, I think from a sort of awareness point of view, the fact that everyone has gone remote has made companies realize that better cloud-based technology that improves collaboration, improves communication between a lot of distributed people is a really critical thing. It's no longer a nice to have, it's something that you need to have in your organization if you want to run a resilient and flexible business. In terms of 2020 itself, as a business, it was really rocky at times, to be honest. In March, a lot of our customers are oil and gas companies. Mm-hmm. So we have the pandemic on one hand, then we had an oil crash. Yep. I don't know if everyone still remembers that. It feels like a lifetime ago, but so at the same time, we're like, well, a lot of our champions were losing their jobs. People were getting laid off. Mm-hmm. You couldn't somehow get hold of people because people were working in different locations and not in their offices. So it was a really difficult time. I think probably for every startup or every company out there had a really difficult time. And we kind of took a step back and said, well, we can't change this. Like, this is how it's going to be. We don't know how long it's going to go on for. We don't know how long oil prices are going to stay down. What can we do with this time? We were really fortunate that we have good investor backing. They understand our business. We had cash in the bank, and we said, look, let's take everything we've learned in 2018 and 2019 and just almost rebuild the product. Well, let's take everything we've learned, all the things we wish we could have done but couldn't have done because perhaps we had so many new customers coming onto the platform. Things had slowed, so let's learn from that. And we essentially almost rebuilt the product from the ground up. And at the same time, we started looking at new industry verticals, maybe areas that aren't quite so impacted by oil. And that's how we ended up in the renewable space. So we now have one of the world's largest wind turbine manufacturers doing all of their global wind turbine marine shipments on our platform. So I think when we look back at 2020, I think it would be like transformative in so many ways. New customers, new verticals, almost a new product. And when I think we look back on 2020, we ended the year 4.5 times up on the top line than we were in January. So wow. Overall, it was a fantastic year for us. We're really happy with it.
That's great. I mean, and like you mentioned, it's not unfamiliar. A lot of companies went through that panic, and a lot of Houston startups and other companies too, so closely tied to the energy industry. So it's great to hear. And where else are you at with Voyager now? What is 2021 about? If 2021 was this really pivotal moment, what's this year about?
Yeah, so 2021 for us is really more expansion. We've been adding a lot of people to the team. We'll probably be up to around 20 to 25 employees by the end of the year. Expanding across verticals. One of the things we did when we did the product rebuild is we wanted to make sure it was something that was cargo agnostic. So whether you are shipping crude oil or grain or metals or wind turbines, it shouldn't matter. It's the same thing. So what that has meant is we can really expand aggressively into other verticals. So that's one of our goals for this year. We're bringing more and more carriers onto the platform. So in terms of shipping companies, we have about 35 to 40 shipping companies operating and connecting and collaborating on our platform every month, which is great. We want to add more. And yeah, just keep growing and sort of repeat last year's sort of revenue growth would be a great target for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So what does kind of growth look like? How are you getting new customers in this kind of weird time, but it's a global industry, so yeah. I'm sure it's always very hard to kind of get across the world. But yeah, what does growing look like, and how are you seeing new customers find you?
Yeah, it was strange because our industry especially is so relationships driven. Mm-hmm. So everyone was like, well, how are you going to meet anyone without conferences? Like, people need to meet you. You have to be face to face to do deals. No one's going to sign a contract with you if they've never met you. One of my largest clients, they don't allow video calls for Teams. They block the cameras. I've actually never seen his face. Even to this day, we signed a huge multi-year MSA agreement with one of the world's largest manufacturers. I have never seen this guy's face. So you have to adapt. You have to get really good at communication. You have to be conscious of people's time differently. You can't necessarily go and sit down and have a lunch and spend 3 hours just kind of chatting, potentially nonsense. You have to be really directed with your time. I think we've had to get really sharp in our communication to potential customers, really focus on communicating the value proposition even more, because I think you have even less opportunities to interact with people, because now you're fighting with people's Google calendars, which are just getting blocked like a doctor's surgery from like 8 a.m. with back-to-back meetings, and now you have to find a way to get in there, and it's harder than ever. So.
It's almost like the technology has to speak for itself. There's no schmoozing. It's just, here's what it is, take it or leave it.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things we thought about when we started doing this product rebuild was, how can we have product-led growth? So the product is selling itself or exposing us to new customers. And because our system is built as a multi-party platform, which allows a lot of people to collaborate together, it means those customers can also give access to their customers. So we work with one major chemical company. They also provide access to their customers who they sell chemicals to, who are also chemical customers. So we're actually able to now get in front of those companies through the architecture of building the platform. So without ever having to pitch to them or even talk to them, I've never met some of these companies. One of them's in Japan. They're already using our platform and they're interacting with every day and they're having that experience. So you have to look for other ways to grow beyond the traditional way of doing things. And I think the industry is getting more open to it, so the opportunities are there.
Yeah, well, that's extremely convenient. It's like you're getting new customers just for the fact of, hey, you're already on our platform.
Yeah, exactly.
That's incredible. So kind of looking back on, your time at Voyager and starting this company, what would you kind of tell another startup that's coming into either this industry or another kind of communications-based software technology company? What sort of advice do you have for them with getting started?
For industrial companies, I would say don't give up. Selling into large companies, large energy companies, it takes time. It's hard work. The analogy I always use is that every extra hour you put in is kind of like buying an extra lottery ticket. And the more hours you put in, the more lottery tickets you have. It's no guarantee that you're going to win the lottery, but every little thing gets you closer and closer. And I think once you have, one or two large marquee accounts, especially in the industrial space, people talk. The industry talks to their peers, they share, they communicate. So as long as you can make those first few customers successful, the rest of the market will start paying attention and they will start wanting to talk to you. So it can be really hard at first. It's a lot of work. Don't give up. You'll get there, find those first two customers, make them successful, and then the rest will come.
Yeah, almost like turning your customers into like champions for you and advocates.
They have to be.
Yeah.
If your customers aren't willing to sing your praises to everyone around them, then you haven't done a good enough job. And we're not there with everyone. For some of our customers, we're like 2 months in, and we have to do a lot of work to get them to that point. But I think especially in this market, where you don't necessarily have 1 million potential customers, your customers might be in the thousands. So you've got to make sure those first 2 or 3 are just really loving what you do, and the rest will follow.
I know this is a very cliched question, but where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see Voyager in 5 years?
I think if you want to solve the problem of how do you move commodities around the world more efficiently, I don't think you can stop at software. I think there's more to solving that problem. And fundamentally, it comes down to the assets. If you're not controlling the assets, then there's only so much you can do with the software. So, I don't see why in 5 years' time, the data that we're going to have on the platform is going to provide really deep insights into how well these businesses are operating, not just at a day-to-day level, but at an asset level. So why not start advising our clients on how to manage those assets better, or how to run their business more efficiently through the platform? Or maybe one day, we have our own ships and people lease the space off us. I think once you have the data set and once you have the information, then that gives you a huge competitive advantage. And I think that could potentially go beyond being just a pure software provider.
So just total domination on the industry, total takeover.
Maybe, we'll see.
So developing Voyager in Houston, how has it been for you in terms of, what sort of resources have you tapped into within the greater Houston innovation ecosystem, and how has that really evolved over the years?
Yeah, so it's changed a lot. So I think back to 2018, in Houston when we first started that, there was a few other startups out here. The ecosystem was still evolving. I think you had Station Houston. And I think since then it's evolved even more. We're seeing new accelerators pop up. The amount of venture capital investors that are now coming to Houston to find and source startups. That wasn't the case 2 years ago when I started off. When we were doing our fundraising, we had to very much look all over the world. And I think now we're getting more and more people saying, hey, we're really interested in Houston's startup scene. Tell us about yourself. We want to meet you. So it's evolved tremendously. I think also the startup community is very tight knit and everyone knows everyone. Being here today was an introduction from another startup in Houston who suggested us and referred us. So we all really try to look out for each other. A lot of us will share comments around hiring, or recently we're hiring a lot of people, and some of the candidates we couldn't hire but we really liked, so we'll be like, oh, that guy would be great for so and so, and we'll message each other and we'll be like, hey, I think you should talk to this person, they're really great. So I think it's becoming more and more tight knit. I think the adventure interest is getting better, there's more accelerators coming. So these are the kind of really important stepping stones. I think what needs to come next is, I guess, some exits, some big exits, some big success stories, more of that. And then I think the flywheel will really start spinning for Houston. And I think from what I hear, there's a couple of companies that are really close to that. And I think we've had one last year as well. So even that's starting to pick up momentum. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Soon it's
Yeah.
happening. So how can people, starting a company, whatever stage they're in, how can they tap into the Houston innovation ecosystem? What's your best advice for that?
Yeah, well, working with people like yourselves, there are a lot of different groups out there that have co-working spaces. We were part of WeWork Labs, but you've also got the Canon. There's plenty of things out there. I'd say just get involved, but more importantly, try to talk to founders. Like they're the best resource because they've gone through that struggle of finding the resources before. So, tap in with the founder networks, and then just talk and get to know people. It's not a big city, and the startup community is tight knit, so you can usually figure it out pretty quick.
I think people love to talk about the people in Houston, and it's so true to what you're saying. Is Houston is such a friendly city, so don't be afraid to ask for help. Basically,
absolutely.